Thank you for listening to Radio Free Idyllwild, the official music and podcast station for Idyllwild, California, the San Jacinto Mountains, and beyond.
Since its opening in 2015, Faro Restaurant has been one of Idyllwild's leading restaurants, applauded for both its gracious service and casual take on fine dining. Nestled in the heart of the beautiful alpine village of Idyllwild, California, Faro is more than just great food and elegant surroundings. It's a treasure destination not to be missed. Faro Restaurant, an official sponsor of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema. It's Italian, elevated.
The Riverside County Film Commission and the Riverside County Economic Development Agency are proud to sponsor the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema. With a region of over 7,300 square miles, the Riverside County Film Commission works closely with all 28 cities located within its borders, as well as state and federal agencies, to help streamline your production and ensure its success, assisting with everything from permitting in all jurisdictions to finding just the right locations for your shoot and many other production necessities. Riverside County, the perfect fit for your next film production.
Hi, it's Ashley Stewart from Team Stewart at Idyllwild Realty, your trusted local expert in the heart of Idyllwild, California. Whether you're buying your dream cabin, selling your mountain home, or looking for the perfect investment, our team delivers unmatched knowledge, personal service, and real results. From cozy cabins to stunning view properties, Team Stewart makes it happen. Visit idbroker.com today. Your Idyllwild adventure starts here.
You're listening to The Stephen Savage Show on Radio Free Idyllwild. And now, here's your host, film and television director, Stephen Savage.
Thanks, Nikki. How you doing, everybody? Savage here with you for yet another episode of The Stephen Savage Show, the official podcast of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema. Podcasting, as always, from Cranium Wheel Studios at Chateau Esteban in the beautiful alpine village of Idyllwild, California. Just a couple hours east of Los Angeles, but a world away at nearly 6,000 feet, high atop majestic Mount San Jacinto and overlooking the great Coachella Valley. And as most of you know, the podcast is technically on hiatus as I am in pre-production on my next two feature films. But I've been popping in and out whenever I have an opportunity and time permits to interview people that, well, like my special guest today, that I just want to hear from. So I'll come back in the studio and see if I can get him in. And this man's been traveling a bit, so I've been unable to cut him off at the pass in his busy schedule until just this moment. So now I'm happy to be back in the studio. But before I bring him on, I'd like to give a shout out to the Idyllwild Film Festival's official lodging sponsor, Talk Eats Pines Retreat, Idyllwild's premier venue for weddings, family reunions, romantic getaways, or just about any large or small gathering or event. But even if you're simply coming to Idyllwild for a quick summer getaway, be sure to book your lodging at Talk Eats Pines Retreat, and you can check them out at talkeatspines.com. That's TAHQUITZ, talkeatspines.com. Okay, let's get things going. As you know, I sometimes like to step away from interviewing film professionals and bring in musicians or authors, playwrights, just people that I admire. And as a musician myself, I'm always on board to speak with people whose accomplishments in the pop, rock, country, jazz worlds, classical musicians, the people who inspire me to create myself and people I just admire. And this man falls dead center into that mold. He's a world-renowned musician and composer whose work you've no doubt heard, even if you haven't always been able to put a face or name to the performer. His resume and discography reads like a who's who of pop, jazz, and easy listening greats, including his recording and live performance stints with such amazing artists as Kenny Rogers, George Benson, Boz Skaggs, a longtime band member with Lee Ritenour's group, and Also the great saxophonist Ronnie Laws, who I've always been a big fan of, among countless others. And yes, that's him you hear playing piano on the huge Lionel Richie-Diana Ross hit Endless Love. And as a member of the phenomenal Tom Scott Band, I was just doing research on them. The band is amazing. He's made appearances on top shows like the Carol Burnett Show and the Pat Sajak Show. Just those are the two that come to mind. And if that wasn't enough, he's also known as a strong supporter of young musicians and performers from around the globe. So allow me to bring him onto the show, ladies and gentlemen, my friend, Mr. Barnaby Finch. Barnaby, welcome to the podcast.
Steve, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I've been a fan of yours for a long time. Thanks.
Oh, that's very sweet. But yeah, I've stood back and watched you do some amazing gigs, and to have you in the studio now, it's just something I've wanted to do for a long time. So thanks for showing up.
Glad to be here. It's beautiful up here.
You and I have been friends for close to a couple decades now, I would imagine. And I love telling people that I actually know you. So there you go. I recently had our mutual friend and longtime collaborator of yours on the podcast, the great bassist Marshall Hawkins, which was Dr. Marshall Hawkins is like you, Marshall. He's just, people know before they even meet him, they know so much about him, and it feels like you're meeting people like you and Marshall. It feels to be in Idyllwild and to have great musicians like you in this tiny little village is just phenomenal, and you and Marshall have a side band that you perform with when you're in Idyllwild, and you're going to be performing at a 2-day tribute birthday event to honor Marshall, and that'll be July 13th and 14th at the internationally renowned Idyllwild Eatery Faro Restaurant, owned and operated by an amazing man and another mutual friend of ours, Mr. Frank Faro, great restaurateur and a huge sponsor of the Idyllwild Cinema Fest and music and arts in Idyllwild all around. And I'm very much looking forward to that event. And one reason being is that I can never get enough of listening to you play. So me and thousands of others. So of course I can't wait for that. I'm sure you're excited.
Well, I am excited about it. Now, unfortunately, I can't attend that particular event because I do a summer sort of music and intellectual retreat in Sonoma County every summer. But,
that's right. Yeah.
But I'm certainly looking forward to it. But I'm pretty sure Paul and the other member of our august trio, which Paul named Bondo, we play at Faro on Tuesdays. They'll be there. But a whole bunch of people are going to be there to honor the great Dr. Marshall Hawkins. He's more than a wonderful bass player. He's kind of the encompassing of the history of jazz all by himself, and he's also a musical icon up here. I mean, he's taught so many kids. He's an inspiration for so many. He's more than a wonderful musician and a wonderful human being. He's a real figurehead and an inspiration. Right. So it's an honor to work with him.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that you won't be that, but now I just remembered. I've heard about, your yearly gig, and but I'll get to see you again soon sometime. Yeah. But yeah, you were talking about Paul Carmen, the great sax player, Paul Carmen. He's part of the group that Barnaby and Marshall are in, and a phenomenal guy. And I'm hoping he's had some injuries to his legs and feet and things, and so he promises he's going to be in here for an interview when he's feeling much better. Just getting up my driveway and these stairs at the chateau is a little daunting. So I like to begin my interviews by allowing my listeners to get to know a bit more background on my guests, and even for big fans of yours who think they know a lot about you, including myself, I'm sure we can learn a lot that we don't know, aside from what we absorb from your amazing music. So if you don't mind, take us through some of the life journey of Barnaby Finch. I know that's a daunting task, but enlighten us, if you will, as to your beginnings, your musical education, and what events and connections in your life have brought you to where you are today.
Well, it's certainly a big question. I grew up in the Chicago area, was born in the city, and then moved to various suburbs and ended up in Winnetka. And nobody in my family played music, but there was music on all the time. And I think I was a beneficiary of the broad spectrum of music I got to hear as a kid. My mom had Bach and Beethoven records. My dad had Charlie Parker, John Coltrane. He actually knew Charlie, called him Bird back in the day. I used to hang out there. Wow. And my sister had Motown. And so like all that stuff, and of course we were buying Beatles and, all that stuff because, I was born in 56. So I grew up in that great era. So that was a good experience for it. And then those days it was kind of like, kids, parents were saying, oh, you should learn to play an instrument. It was kind of a social thing, the way you learned how to dance or something.
Right.
And so, I took some piano. I wanted to play drums. And none of it did seriously. I wish I had done really, studied better. But when I moved to California and I was 14, I knew enough piano to play an Elton John song and a James Taylor song, and immediately met a girl and, was singing, and all of a sudden, so like, that motivation of like, trying to be popular really motivated me. And of course, within a couple of years, I'm no longer playing the music that's going to have any girls interested in me, but I'm going, look at listen, Yes, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Within a couple of years of that, I'm listening to Chick Corea and, and Herbie Hancock, and, and so I'm so glad I boned up on that stuff because I'm mostly self-taught, but I really worked on it pretty hard. And so, and then, so living in California, I was going to college at UCSB and then went to UCSD for 3 years. And during that time at UCSD, I was playing at a club in Carlsbad called the Royal Palms with a band interestingly named the Messengers of Love. And how 70s is that? And met my current wife there. So I met her 50 years ago.
Wow.
This July.
Congrats.
And we've still been together. She's just a delightful.
She's a nice lady. Very
great.
Sweet.
Yeah, Anne's a delight. She supports. So that was that. And then when I was in San Diego, I got to meet a couple of musicians. One particular really good guitar player, excellent guitar player named Pat Kelly that I knew down in San Diego. He actually recommended me for a audition with Ronnie Laws. And this happened probably 77. And I went to LA and got the gig. And so it was really nice that, so I, it's the way, I'm sure it happens in your business too. There's a lot of word of mouth. It's like you're not going to have a brochure telling people to get Steve Savage as a director. It's going to be they see your movies and say, oh, he's a good guy to work with,
Yeah.
So, because of doing that Ronnie Laws gig, the very first tour I did with him had Greg Arrico on drums, who used to be in Sly's band.
Right, yeah.
And he liked the way I played, and he said, oh, come play on this Lee Oscar record, the harmonica player from War.
Right.
And at that record session was Gene Page, an arranger who heard me play, and that's how I ended up on Lionel Richie stuff. So it's all kind of word of mouth. And Pat also recommended me for this band that Dave Boroff had at the Flying Jib, and that turned out to be a very popular funk band at a place called the Flying Jib, and Encino is no longer there. But, it ended up being a really great funk band, and we packed the house every night, and pretty soon we had an amazing drummer named Vinny Caliuta that wanted to be the drummer, and an amazing bass player named Emil Steubenhaus. So we had like all of a sudden these great musicians, and
that fell together. And
so it's all word of mouth. So all this stuff that happened, and then I had musicians coming in to hear that band that got to know me. So Lee Ritenour heard me at that club and hired me without an audition, and a couple other people where Bill Champlin would come in and he said, oh, come play strings with me on this David Foster show. So I ended up meeting David Foster and doing a few tours with him. And so it's all like how that worked in the music business, where you just happen to be at the right place at the right time. You have to be reasonably competent, but I also was never going to be like the top draw. And back in the 70s and the 80s, there was so much work in the music business that if I was 5 or 6 on a contractor's list, I would get called. And luckily, I was able to do a lot of work back then. And then, as things started slowing down, I kind of knew that I would be one of the people that the phone wasn't going to be ringing off the hook the way it had for a few years.
Right.
And I better start thinking about my financial future. So I started, getting investing and learned how to do that. And it's really helped me over the years. And I also think that being in LA and hearing how good the really, really good people were is something that taught me I better prepare for the times if I'm realistic.
Right.
That, I'm good. Nobody's questioning my ability, or nobody's questioning my competence for being there, my credentials, but nobody's going, oh man, you should hear this guy. He's the new Dave Grusin, the new Bill Evans. I was never that. And knowing I wasn't was a giant help to me. So, and then we moved up to Idyllwild, I think in 96. So we've been here for 30 years.
But you're in New York too a lot.
We have an apartment in New York, and we go to Cambria. We travel a lot, and we've been very fortunate. My wife and I have been able to travel all over the world and see stuff. But I have to say, when we come back to Idyllwild, it never feels like a provincial backwater. I mean, it's a really great little town. I've never had the sense of community that I've had anywhere that I have here, and we're delighted with Idyllwild. I mean, I just wanted to mention a wonderful memorial for this lady named Julie Lively, who was a wonderful teacher and coach and, an inspiration to so many people. I was at that the other day, and the truth is, I didn't really know her that well. I think I talked to her a couple times after dances 15 years ago.
Right.
But so many people I know had their lives changed by her and her husband, Miles, that I felt like I knew her. So I learned lessons just the other day at being this memorial about connections, about community, and about the outpouring of love. And Idyllwild has that. And I was so inspired to be there, even though I didn't really know her very well. I felt like her love and energy, that she healed so many people. She really is a healer. Yeah. And so is Miles. That it affected me like, well, you've changed the lives of so many of my friends. As far as I'm concerned, I love you. Right. And so I'm just delighted to be in Idyllwild.
Yeah. I have this. I mean, it's always been that way for me. I kind of grew up here, although we lived in Orange County. My family's owned property here since the 40s, and so it's just kind of I feel privileged because I was able to grow up in a small town, but it's not just a small town. There's a definite vibe here that people who come to the Idyllwild Film Festival, they pick up on it right away. And as I told you earlier, the film festival sells itself because people get here, and people have actually bought houses. I was talking to I think Ashley Stewart or another realtor, I can't remember, but people come up here and they've come up for the festival, and 6, 7, 8, a dozen people have actually ended up buying homes here. So that's the effect it has,
Well, Idyllwild has gotten a reputation as being, like there's a name, one of the top 100 art towns. Right. There's a lot of music up here, so it's a very cool, for a town this size. It's got like way more concentration of musicians than, say, other mountain towns like Big Bear. Right. Your festival has certainly put Idyllwild on the map, and so it's like now it's a draw for all these things that are really wonderful. And I have to give a shout out to Idyllwild Arts. It's the only private art school west of the Mississippi, and it's got a lot of kids going on to Juilliard and Curtis and all these great places. And Idyllwild Arts is kind of the reason why Marshall Hawkins is still up here. And Paul was a teacher there for many years. I was on the board for many years. And I would not be in some little town in the mountains be playing with musicians on the caliber of Paul and Marshall, who are world-class musicians, if it weren't for Idyllwild Arts. So a shout-out to those guys.
And that's what's funny is you walk into Faro Restaurant when you guys are playing, and I've brought people up here, and I've told them, I go, you guys don't realize this isn't just some band. These guys have a history of iconic musical connection and the feel of to walk into a small town of about 3,500 people year round and to walk into a restaurant and see people playing, and it's everyone appreciates. It's not like, oh my goodness, who is this? Everybody who comes there has a preconceived idea of how great what they're going to experience, not just a great meal at Faro, but also watching you guys and most of the musicians that play at Faro. Frank has a track record of bringing some great musicians together. I'll give him that.
He does. I have to say, he's been really supportive of music and does the best he can to try to get the word out. And I have musicians like Paul and Marshall, we play jazz every week, and I'm happy to admit those guys are 10 times the jazz player I am. I have a lot of experience in a variety of styles, but I'm still learning from both of them. And Paul, who did Frank Zappa and a bunch of stuff in L.A., and Marshall, Miles Davis and Shirley Horn and Roberta Flack. I mean, his list goes on. And those guys don't even know, actually, all the things they've taught me that we don't sit down and have a conversation about it. But I listen and I go, okay, yeah, taste and space. I need to work on that, that kind of stuff. And now that you mentioned Faro, I'd like to say that my wife and I have been sponsoring a small summer Faro music festival for the last few years, and we have a big one this year. And there's going to be my Jazzgrass band on Fridays, except for the 21st is going to be Gypsuoso, which is Jeremy Levy and a great gypsy band from the desert. And then Thursday is going to be a lot of local acts, TJ and the Dusty Boots, my friend Terry Joe, and then Paul's band, that acoustic, what do they call themselves? Arist Triocrats. That's got Sarah Kay in it. And then some other good bands, bringing Nathan James up and Vincent's Choice, and a band of mine that we call the Eclectones, where we're just doing a variety of instrumental music. And those are Thursdays, and these are all 6 to 9 at 4. And then Tuesdays, the usual jazz thing we do, and it's going to be I think the second Tuesday in August all the way through the second Tuesday in September. But 3 of those nights we're allocating sort of special jazz things. Paul's bringing up a band called 4 Bits with Joey Sellers, and it's Paul's very wonderful, experimental, kind of cool avant-garde music, and with incredible musicians, and the great Kendall Kay's on drums on that. And then also Marshall is bringing up a wonderful piano player from San Diego named Joshua White. And I think that's the 20th. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but it's on the Faro webpage.
Right.
And he's got Tyler Crutel on drums, so that's going to be a killer trio.
Right.
And then another Tuesdays will be that same Eclectones band. So 3 of the Tuesdays will be the usual Bondo, the band with Paul and Marshall, and then 3 of them are going to be this special jazz. So I'd get reservations early, and please come out and support and help Faro and help live music. They're all great. All these bands are great.
Right. Well, Frank's a smart man.
Yes.
His business, his restaurateurship. Anyway, music's always been a part of that, and he knows how to bring them really great musicians in. And there's always variety. People say, "Well, there's jazz night. It's always jazz at Faro." What are you talking about, man? Right. And there's interesting, funky stuff. Your band, Jazzgrass, right?
Yeah, that's crossing bluegrass and jazz. It's
it's so different and unique, and it's so enjoyable. But yeah, it's interesting. Real quick before I forget, has piano always been your main instrument, or how did you get into where you actually sat down and said, "This is going to be what I play"?
Well, I mean, like I said, when I was a kid, I was encouraged to do different instruments. The first one I did was violin. And, I wasn't really taking private lessons. But back in those days, public schools all had like orchestras, and they would give you instruments. And
right.
I mean, I don't want to talk about how great public education was in the suburbs of Chicago in the 60s, but it's like something you don't hear about anymore. I mean, the school I was at offered in 3rd grade chemistry and topology. I mean, what public school? So I took those. But I mean, so it was an amazing thing. But I wanted to play drums a little later on, and when I moved to California, I played a little saxophone pretty badly.
Yeah.
but I had just from playing piano, and had taking some classical lessons, not practiced enough, but I knew how to, learn chord charts and stuff. So when I got the books of the Elton John and the James Taylor stuff, I could learn how to do it. And like I say, immediately got a girlfriend, and so that certainly motivated me. And then pretty quickly, I'm going, oh yeah, I guess these piano players I'm hearing, they're like a whole lot better than me. I guess I got a lot of work to do, which I still feel like to this day.
That's the thing.
And it's never ending. And so, but that's really what motivated me. So that's when I was 14 and moved to California, met a girl, realized I could sing okay and play the piano okay. It was like, piano's it.
Right.
And I also had the ancillary benefit of a lot of people in high school find that it's, what do they call it? The tyranny of the good looking and the athletically gifted. And so there's always like social issues for a lot of people in high school. And I didn't even go to prom, and that kind of stuff. And that was because I was so busy already being a musician, where I was already playing with musicians I was in La Jolla at the time, but I was playing with musicians from Claremont and all around San Diego. But by the time I was 17, I knew I wanted to be a musician. I was already getting good enough to be playing with musicians that were older than me and learning from them. And so I was delighted, it turns out later, to look back on it, to not have this sort of anxiety about acceptance and a sense of identity that happens so often to young people, where you're like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I've got zits and I'm awkward, and I didn't have that problem. I mean, I had the zits, but it was really nice knowing what I wanted to do in life, and I never looked back.
I love how you talk about always learning, though. That's what I feel I remember watching a Martin Scorsese interview where he said, the day I stop learning is the day I give up this film thing, because, and I think that's wonderful that you feel that way, that even the guys you play with, who you pal around, with on stage, and like Marshall and Paul, that you say you're learning from them all the time. I think that's pretty amazing. So
it's totally true. And and you're in a field that's deeply important. My wife and I love film, and we could talk about Blade Runner for hours, and we talk about interviews with directors, and I've seen a few of them live. And somebody says, "Oh, here's the best film ever. You need to see High Moon. You need to see Blade Runner. You need to see The Godfather." It's like those iconic films. You got a Casablanca poster on your wall. I just wrote an article about that. This is an important thing in my life. The film is an incredible art, and I'm really wonderful that you're in it.
A couple of years ago, I did a tour. I did a bunch of film schools here in the States and then overseas, the UK. I did and Ireland and Scotland. I did a lecture series on that film. And there's when I show like an anniversary film at the Idyllwild Film Festival, the 50th anniversary of this, there's no one alive that worked on Casablanca anymore. They're all long gone. So I have to rely on authors and the books they write. And then I decided, I want to just learn everything I can about this film and then do a lecture series. And it turned out so great. It was the 80th anniversary of Casablanca.
Wow.
And I just enjoy doing this. I like interacting with people. Like you said, you and Ann, that you talk about film a lot, you guys, and I geek out a lot. So I found that if I'm looking around and there's nobody to talk to about film, right. I just go do a lecture thing. So I think next year, I'm doing Shane. I forget which anniversary. It'll be the 65th, maybe 75th. I can't remember. I'll look it up. But I think that's the one I'm going to pick, and then I'll dive into it and learn everything I can about it. Well, I already know a lot, but there's always the little details that.
Well, it's interesting because, those of us that love the arts tend to love more than just the art we do.
Of course. Yeah.
And I know you've played music before,
mm-hmm.
but you don't do it all the time professionally. But I'm sure you've got opinions. Well, I love that drummer for Metallica, or I love this, Bill
right.
Evans recording. So the same way we're like, oh, we thought the cinematography in Breaking Bad was incredible. Or
mm-hmm.
or we like to talk about Alfred Hitchcock's camera angles, all the
mm-hmm.
stuff. So we nerd out, even though in some ways we're not qualified the way you would be. But that doesn't mean you can't have an opinion, because everybody does. Mm. And so, film is an incredible art.
And film, people are savvy about it, and especially with the advent of the internet, and people have access to just clips from movies and have people talking in their heads through their headphones about why this camera angle or whatever. And like music is a funny thing, because film, you get to a point where you'll have more opinions about, God, why did they choose that? What caused them to pick that edit or whatever in a film? But with music, when you're seeing like a live performance or even a recorded performance, and when it's great, you just step back and listen and just let it happen. Where film is analytic, I get really annoyed with music. Music critics are just people who think they know, let's say, classic rock, and they go into it and I go, man, just let me enjoy it. I don't want it. I don't need to know the nuts and bolts. But with film, I do geek out for sure. I decided to split up my questions for you between your recording resume, which is extensive indeed, and your touring life, because I have had so much access of watching you play. I'm interested about that dynamic between playing big arenas, big concerts like you have done, and also the small rooms. And you don't play any differently, when you're in a small venue as just clips I've seen of you playing in front of thousands of people. And live performance seems to hold a special place for you. Many musicians hate the road, but it seems maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like you've kind of thrived on living out of a suitcase in hotels. So let's talk about some of the incredible tours you've done in your life. And I think it'd be interesting to, as a pianist in great demand, you've done major tours, and that what sticks out in your mind as favorites, years or certain artists, and even tours that were maybe less fun from you. I'd be up to hearing that as well. So give us some insight.
Well, I think musicians, especially like me, that, it was reasonably busy in the early years when there was tons of studio work. And then when the business started slowing down, and I was one of the people that was getting less calls, and people mm-hmm. like, Dean Parks are still busy to this day, every day they want to be. So,
right.
So we had no choice but to tour. Mm-hmm. But I certainly enjoyed, I would say, touring. I was gone a lot of years in the 80s. I was gone a lot of months during the years of the 80s. And mm-hmm. it was challenging on my marriage. My wife was always understanding and supportive, but
that's good.
I didn't want to be gone 8 months a year, and like 86 and 87 years like that I was. So that was a drag. And I have to say, I got to play with incredible musicians, and I had a huge amount of joy making people happy in front of thousands of people. Mm-hmm. But that was 2 hours a day.
Right.
The other 22 are airports, hotels, venues, deli trays, buses, no sleep.
Right.
So that part was no fun at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was lucrative. I have no regrets whatsoever, but I'm not at all bummed about not being on the road anymore.
Yeah.
But as far as some of the tours, some of them were amazing from the standpoint of just, back in 83 or was it 84? I played Rock in Rio Festival with 400,000 people.
Right. Yeah.
And that was with George Benson. And on the same bill was James Taylor and Al Jarreau. And I also gave my wife a plane ticket down there so she got to come with me. We got to fly in on a helicopter, and it was great. Uh-huh. And there was an experience that at the time we had tears in our eyes, but it turned out to be sort of more significant historically later, in that during James Taylor's show, he did, You Just Call Out My Name, and 400,000 people were singing along. And it was like just inspiring this wave of love and shared knowledge of this song. Right. And it turns out later I read that James had been going through like some personal crises there. I don't know if it was getting out of the drug thing or thinking that music was a grind. And that night, that inspiration of that actually kind of turned him around, and he wrote a song called "Only a Dream in Rio." That's a great song. Yeah. And to have look back on it, my wife and I go, wow, we were there for this moment when his life changed. So that was an amazing moment. Certainly touring with Lionel Richie, where we had private jets and fireworks. And that was kind of fun to be able to play really big venues with him, and that was a great, very entertaining show. And then there's other shows where I was just proud to be on stage with, like I toured with David Foster, and I had no problem admitting I was the worst guy in the band. That doesn't mean bad, but when you've got Nathan East and Vinnie Colaiuta, David Foster on stage, or a tour we did in Japan with Malta, where we had Don Grusin was the other keyboard player, and Robin Ford was in the band, and Tim Landers, and that might have been, was that Vinnie also? I mean, it was just Harvey Mason was on that. And, to be on stage and hearing this sound coming off the stage of this, like I was just starting, this is like as good as music sounds, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Right. And so those kind of things are really fun from the standpoint of music, even though nobody here knows who the sax player Malta is. He's kind of this cheesy Japanese music, but he treated me good and paid really well. Right. And they'd hire these aces from L.A. And so those tours were a lot of fun to hear the music that we do. And then of course, there's nights where playing with Paul and Marshall, where things just really come together, and those guys, I have to say, they're patient with the fact that I'm not a jazz player on their level, but they give me respect, and I bring something to the band that those guys are so good at jazz, they can play any old standard and make it really incredible. So I think for them, the actual song we're playing isn't as important as what you're having to say in the story you're telling, which is really how you're supposed to do jazz. But because I'm not on their level as an improviser, I tend to want to bring in pieces more. So I've kind of added a compositional variety to that group that they may not do on their own because they don't need it. Sure. I need it. Right. And so there's nights where we'll play stuff and I'm just going, wow, that was kind of perfect, guys. That was like, so I get just as much joy on the nights when it's really great than I do on anything else I've ever done. So again, your question is germane, whether the difference between playing for 400,000 people, playing these giant halls with private jets, or whether, playing up here in Idyllwild. I've got a fun band right now with Jack Jackaruso and Lily McCabe. Lily McCabe Barksdale's her name. A great violinist, great singer. And we just added Joel Hamilton, who's just moved up here, great bass player. And we're playing one of the Thursdays in Faro. And they're called the band's called Like Minds. And we have a profoundly eclectic book of music. We've got everything from Doobie Brothers to stuff like by Josh Nelson. We've got Steely Dan. We've got all sorts of some obscure things. We even do a Sarah Vaughan jazz tune. And we've got like soul music, and I'm just so thrilled. That's what I love. I love having the style and the genre change all the time. Sure. And those they're a delight to play with that quartet. So that's another one of the Thursdays in August. So come on out, hear that.
Yeah, we keep talking about Faro, and we're not putting plugs in just because we like the guy who runs the place and owns the place. It's really an experience, and I'm grateful to Frank. I've introduced Frank as the guy who really helped launch my career more than anyone. I was going to film school. He gave me a job waiting tables and gave me flexibility. Got film school today, get in the car and go. You got a 2.5 hour drive, and so he's one of those guys. His support for the arts, especially music, is just it's phenomenal. So
when did you direct your first feature?
2006.
Wow.
And that
20 years.
Yeah. So I did my thesis film was a feature film, and we were talking about Baird Bryant, the great cinematographer. He lived here in Idyllwild, and most thesis films are short films. But of course, I'm a bumblebee. People say bumblebees aren't supposed to fly. Aerodynamically, they aren't set up. Little stubby wings and a big ass, but they fly. And that's how I've always been that way as a filmmaker. So. I learned that Baird Bryant, the guy who shot a majority of Easy Rider, lived here in Idyllwild. I went to his door, and he was a little old man of 81 at the time. And I said, "Would you shoot my thesis film?" And he said, "Come on in, we'll talk about it." And he thought I was shooting a short. And I said, "No, I have a feature script." And he goes, "What the hell, kid?" And then he goes, "I like that. I can't say no to that." And he's the one who shot my thesis film. And then about... I was the oldest guy in my film school because I went late because I was a traveling musician and recording artist. That I got started in film school late. But so it was only 2 years after I shot my thesis film that I shot my first feature with a big name cast, and solid producers. And it's been 20 years now.
If you don't mind, because you're supposed to be interviewing me, but I wanted to ask you one question.
Sure. That
you can answer, because you know a lot about film. So in your opinion, is Citizen Kane as good as everybody thinks it is?
It's the most innovative film, especially for its day. But there's a lot of people need to go back, and even in the silent era, look at the innovation. We wouldn't be making films the same way or have progressed in film as quickly if it hadn't been for a certain few people. Mary Pickford invented the close-up. Mary Pickford invented certain camera angles and movement that everybody still uses today. She invented the close-up because she was crying in a scene and she wanted people to see the tears, so she said, "Bring the camera in." And Citizen Kane and Orson Welles, that film, it's so innovative the way it's shot, and he was inventing things, he and his cinematographer, as he went along. So as far as it's an interesting story, is it as cinematic as films being made in the last 50 years? I don't know. That'd be an argument, but I think it is. I enjoy it. But if you just look at it from a completely innovation standpoint, it's one of the greatest movies ever made. And we wouldn't be making films the way we do today if it wasn't for that. The spaghetti western, Sergio Leone said it was Citizen Kane that made him want to shoot movies. And so anyway, I hope that answered your question.
Well, thanks for indulging me. I appreciate it.
Of course.
I'd love to have a chat sometime about all that.
Yeah, anytime you want. I love hanging out with you.
Have you heard about the Art Alliance of Idyllwild? Our mission is to create community through art. This year's calendar of events to support that mission is July 18th, Home Studios Tour. August 8th, Plein Air Festival. September 5th, Here and Now. October 10th, Art Walk and Wine Tasting. December 4th, Art Cake Giveaway. December 5th, Winter Solstice Show. Visit artinidyllwild.org and follow us on Instagram at Art Alliance of Idyllwild for details.
Welcome to the world of New Spirit Vacation Homes, Idyllwild's premier vacation home rental provider. Whether it be an escape from the heat, a visit to the snow, or for the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema, we have the perfect vacation rental for you. New Spirit Vacation Homes is distinctive from any other vacation rental company, not only because our guests have the broadest choice of luxurious homes to choose from, but also because we ensure guests' expectations are met and they have the most enjoyable and fulfilling getaway. New Spirit Vacation Rentals, an official sponsor of the Idyllwild International Film Festival. Find us at newspiritvacationhomes.com.
Every small town has that one special spot, a place where strangers become friends and friends share great times together. Idyllwild, California has just that spot, Terrence Place Pub and Gallery, where live music and good company create amazing memories. We feature fine wines along with international and domestic tapped beers. Our vibe is welcoming, fun, and eclectic. Terrence Place Pub and Gallery is proud to be an official sponsor of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema. Come and experience the alpine charm of Terrence Place, located in a village lane in downtown Idyllwild, California. We invite you to stop by and have a great time.
At Pure Bean Coffee, Idyllwild, California's premier boutique coffee house, our passion is roasting the highest quality coffee for the most discerning coffee lovers. Our beans are ethically sourced and hand-selected from the world's finest coffee regions. You will notice the enhanced flavor nuances and low acidity with your very first taste. And as a proud sponsor of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema, it's our wish to make the best impression possible on filmmakers and attendees from around the globe. So whether it's your first cup in the morning, a midday pick-me-up, or an evening taste of excellence to top off your day, always remember, we at Pure Bean love coffee as much as our customers do.
My great friend, the production and sound designer and recording engineer Tom Corcoran, he was part of an interesting documentary that screened at the Idyllwild Film Festival maybe 10 years ago, before going into major distribution. It had theatrical release and everything, but I'm not sure if you've seen it. It's called Hired Gun, and it's basically about side musicians and people who consider themselves part of major acts, like Billy Joel's band that he had for decades, And I know you've done a ton of session work, and including on some major big selling albums, but do you enjoy session work, or do you find that being a full-time part of a group, and I'm not even talking about the bands you've put together here in Idyllwild basically for your own pleasure, but to entertain people here. But have you found in the past you've enjoyed having a group situation where you were like a full-time equal member, or have you always kind of enjoyed? We were talking about the musicians' unions earlier and things like that. Did you learn from session work about the business itself? Or have you ever found that being in a band is kind of a cool thing? I just curious.
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I think for me, because I was never the top guy, and I did a few like top sessions, but I did a whole bunch of stuff because, again, back in the day there was so much work. I would be, just doing, a lot of B dates, for stuff you haven't heard. Sure. I recorded an album for a Mexican artist, do jingles and stuff like that. We did a lot of, spec demos where we would play on somebody's thing. And we call them spec demos because they were your speculatives, because the idea is if you got a deal, you get paid. But spec really meant don't spec nothing. But I learned a lot on those kind of sessions. So a lot of experience you just get from being in the studio. And so I did tons and tons of that kind of stuff. For some of it really good, some of it pretty lame. But it was so I learned a lot of that. But as far as being in bands, I think I was never somebody that was like, oh, we're going to put together like a band and we're going to try to be the next Motley Crue or the next whatever. Because like all the tours I did there was a band and there'll have to be, people would be on the gigs for years, and some of them there'd be changes, but it was all hired by somebody, and there'd be a musical director that might audition. And so once in a while there'd be rotating chairs. I would say over the years, probably 25 years I worked with Ritenour, I probably went through 20 different drummers. And it wasn't like they were bad. They're just, who can do this tour? Right. And some people you'd never heard of. And we had a tour with Vinny Caluta, did with David Weckl, and, a bunch of great, we had a guy named Dave Haynes who just played a drum machine really well, the way a Future Man does with Bela Fleck. And that he's a great bass player named Victor Wooten's brother. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff. So it didn't feel so much like a band as just people that I hung with. But I mean, there were certain people that were like Stanley Banks, a great bass player that did George Benson for years. Right. Yeah. So, I got to know him pretty well. And he's somebody else I learned a lot from, even though we never sat down and got lessons. It's kind of about what I call Brooklyn time. It's kind of a New York style of how to play certain funk music. A band called Stuff that had Eric Gale in it and Cornell Dupree and Richard T. They had a certain kind of groove that kind of nobody else really had. And it's a pretty subtle thing, the differences in rhythm. Right. And I remember when I did Tom Scott, we had Eric Gale, a great studio guitar player, was in the band. And I had a chance to hang with Eric quite a bit. And I said, hey, so Eric, what was it like? Must have been amazing playing with Steve Gadd. He's a legendary drummer. And he said, yeah, he was good once we trained him. And my first instinct was like, well, that's kind of arrogant. And the more I thought about it, I said, now I kind of know what he's talking about. It's like, as good as this guy is, he maybe wasn't familiar with what I call Brooklyn time. Right. And I think they kind of kicked his ass a little bit. And this is a guy who doesn't need a lot of ass kicking. and he ended up playing that music so well. And now he plays like that with James Taylor, and he plays like that with his Steve Gadd band and the Gadditude and all that kind of stuff. He's got this certain kind of lope. I fell in love with this record by I think he's Danish, a guy named Simon Oslander. It's a funk record that he did with Steve Gadd and Will Lee. And it's just these infectious old school funk tunes. They got boogaloo beats and old school grooves. And I like this music so much I wrote out charts from about 5 or 6 songs on the record. And now we're doing them around town. We're going to do a couple in August. And it's like, the way he plays, I just think he wouldn't have played that way. As good as he was with Chick Corea, a million sessions, Jay Grade and all this stuff.
Right.
He wouldn't have played that way had he not gotten, I guess, his butt kicked a little bit by the Brooklyn guys, just because you're going to do this one thing really well. And the same is true trying to play with Brazilian musicians or play with Cuban musicians, which I wouldn't even try to get up on stage with those guys. Rhythm is very cultural, and it takes years to developed just the right instincts. We're talking hundredths of a second. We're talking musical approaches, very important dynamics. The way Brazilian people play drums, where some instruments are a little bit louder than the other instrument in the kit, and some are a little behind the beat, some are a little on top of the beat. We're talking fractions of a second, and if you don't have it right, you're a gavacho, you're a gringo,
Right.
And so it's really a subtle thing, and so that was a kind of a good lesson I learned there about the importance of paying attention to all the rhythms. I remember all the years I did George, and I don't think anybody, including George, ever came up to me and said, that part you're playing on the piano, I don't know about it, or that voicing you're using for the 7+9, I don't know if I like that. Nobody ever said that. They assumed I knew my stuff. But the drummer and the bass player, everybody on the bus is talking about whether they like how those two play together.
Right.
And if that isn't completely locked in, nobody's happy.
Yeah, that marriage is so important.
Oh, man. And nobody's happy if that's not right. And everybody had an opinion about how the drummer played.
Right.
They talk about a hot seat for a band. If you're a young drummer, it won't be fair, but you're going to get talked to and have an opinion made of your playing more than anybody else in a band by a factor of 10.
Right.
And you know what? They're right. They're right. Because if you don't have good drums, you got nothing.
Right.
So it's just, I learned a lot from, just sort of paying attention and listening to these guys, and so, but I mentioned Stanley, I just sort of said he had this kind of Brooklyn time in that band. He had he played tambourine with his foot, and he had great time. And he was kind of picky about our drummers. We'd sometimes get a drummer in and, what do you think of the new guy? He's, he's good, but I'm going, gee, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
But he's like, and then he gets somebody like when we had Ricky Lawson when I first did it. And he's going, oh, no, that's the law.
Right.
That was that name he called him. And, and it's like some years later, I realized, wow, he had a point.
It goes back to what you were saying. We're always learning. And if you stop learning, Scorsese's quote, give it up. But yeah, I find that really fascinating that when you're in a situation where you think you're being barked at or people are judging you, they're actually teaching you. You're actually learning so much to a point, but I mean, some people are just impossible to please, but,
it's never happened to me, but I've heard of people where it transformed into abuse. And there was a movie made about it. I forget what the name of it, but it was over the top where this guy was yelling at everybody. But certainly like the Buddy Rich, who's unquestionably one of the great drummers of all time, will go down in history. But there's tapes now of people recording his tirades on the bus.
Right.
You think I'm kidding? I get up here and all I hear is clams. I'll stop the price right now. And I'm leaving out the profanities.
Right.
But I mean, it was no fun being in his band. But I understand his quest for perfectionism. I remember having a couple chats with David Foster, who would often come in with bands that had been around for a long time, like Chicago, who were good bands and had a bunch of hits, and then they aren't having hits anymore. And David Foster comes in and he's like, well, these guys in the band play pretty good. But the guys I like to hire, the Jeff Picaros and the J.R. Robinsons, those guys are not just good, they're great. And I can't wait 4 hours for a track, I'm waiting 1 hour. So he brings in these guys, these albums sell millions, but the band's chafing.
Yeah.
And this has happened to him a lot. And I understand. And, maybe he's had a reputation for occasionally being arrogant, but I also sympathize with wanting it to be great.
Yeah.
And why would you settle for, A- when you can get A+?
Yeah. There you go.
And I'm sure your business is the same thing.
It's like the Wrecking Crew, that whole story. Bands, the Wrecking Crew would be brought in to play for, like, let's just take the Monkees, for example. And most of the band would get upset. Well, why aren't I playing on my records? And they would get really angry because they'd bring in these musicians who were just amazing. and Mike Nesmith of the Monkees, I remember him saying, I look back and go, that just inspires me to be better. Why are you using this guitar player? I said, why am I not as good or better than that guitar player? And yeah.
Well, another documentary, The Muscle Shoals, those guys, these white guys in Alabama, and they'd bring the Rolling Stones and Aretha in, and these guys, and then they'd hear the track. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's an amazing. That one particular documentary you mentioned, I want to see it because I haven't seen it, but I've seen a bunch of those. 20 Feet from Stardom, and I just saw Billy Joel's documentary, and just saw the Maurice White from Earth, Wind and Fire.
Right.
And they chafed as a band. I mean, because Maurice kind of treated them as his band in a way, and they were a great band. But then he had the Phoenix Horns, and he had these Tom Tom, and he had David Foster, and all these people come in, and it's like all of a sudden, it brings it to a different thing. I'm not necessarily a new level because I think they're one of the best funk bands ever. But still, I know with these producers, they hear things that the average guys in the band don't hear.
Sure.
And, that's why Steely Dan had a band for a while and said, screw that, we're just going to have session musicians. And now those records like Asia and Gaucho and what was it, Pretzel Logic, and one right before that, it's like a clinic in Larry Carlton playing. It's a not Pretzel Logic, but I forget what it's called, but the album right before Asia. And it's like, that's, it's incredible music, and those tracks are like now just legendary tracks of perfection.
Right.
That then he put the musicians through grueling. I mean, these, like 20 to 30 takes for guys, and believe me, take 2 was great.
Yeah.
Take 1 was great. And there's a story, Jeff Porcaro stuck his sticks through a drums and walked out on one of them.
Right, yeah. It can frustrate a musician when they think, what do you want from me?
I know. And these guys, it really is good. This isn't like the Trogs.
Yeah.
This is guys, believe me, you heard take 1, you'd be going, damn.
Yeah. I think Jeff Baxter said something about playing with Steely Dan, that it was like boot camp every day, and I think, but when they were on stage, all that work paid off, then their recording sessions were magic. And, yeah, the movie is called Hired Gun, and it was on Amazon for a while. It may still be, but you can find it out there. It's really worth a watch. They interview some rock musicians, blues, jazz guys, R&B, pop. They interview all these guys who, and it's kind of bittersweet. A lot of them thought that Billy Joe just loved me. I don't know why he let me go. Well, Billy, it's his name on it, and he wanted to play with some younger meat. He wanted to get some new ideas. So,
well, it might be in Hired Gun, but there's a lot of that in his documentary.
Sure, yeah.
Which is a great documentary, and it doesn't hold back on the things he did wrong.
Right. I've seen it, and I had I wasn't ever a big Billy Joel fan, but I had a lot more respect for him and his music after watching that doc. You need to step into somebody's shoes once in a while, and then you kind of get it. Like I was telling you about, I hated film festivals when I first started entering films into film festivals. I thought they treated the filmmakers like cattle, and then I started one, and it became successful, and now I kind of, about 90% of it I understand. So anyway.
Well, he sold a lot of records, so, and people will say, well, you should just rely on, how popular people are. But there's something to be said for, the Eagles and the Beatles and Michael Jackson and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, being, Michael Jackson, musicians are going to go, yeah, a whole much credit goes to Quincy Jones, who was one of the great musicians of all time.
And producer.
Great producer, great arranger. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was, back in the 50s, arranging for Frank Sinatra. Mm-hmm. And he went and studied with that wonderful, I forget her name, that wonderful French orchestrator.
Yeah,
and she taught him, I mean, her name's really familiar. I'm embarrassed, I can't remember it, but I'm 70
now.
I can't think. But he learned so much from her. And, and all the great arrangers will tell you that, other arrangers. I remember, I'm a big fan of Dave Grusin, got to be keyboard 2 to a few tours with him, and he's one of my favorite arrangers.
Nice.
And Tom Scott was saying, in the early days, and like in 61, he was on the Andy Williams show. Mm-hmm. And back then there were 4 arrangers on a show like that. And it was like Johnny Mandel and Bill May and I mean, all these great arrangers, Dick Hazard. I mean, and Dave will tell you he learned so much from being on a crew with 3 other great arrangers, because he was new at the craft, already really good, but on the craft. Can you imagine doing a movie like being when you were young, having a chance to work with 3 great directors? What you just pick up by osmosis is invaluable.
Yeah. I'll tell you a real quick funny story that just happened a couple months ago. I downloaded the Sanford & Sons theme song. Quincy Jones at his cheesiest production line TV work ever, and I drove to the little house in North Hollywood where that opening scene, they turned that into the junkyard, and just for the opening credit thing, and Quincy's song starts playing, and I just put it on and watched it, and I went, how freaking brilliant. This guy wrote some, his whole family, they're all just so, I don't know, Quincy's just an icon, but he could write this jingly kind of thing, but it lives in the minds of our culture now forever. And people don't realize how much cultural significance a great composer and producer can have by doing some of his most simple work.
Right.
I love that.
It's funny you brought that up because there was a conversation with arrangers, these guys that, Jorge Calandrelli and Dave Grusin and Johnny Mandel, these guys that write this incredible stuff. And then I remember having a conversation, it might have been with Tom or somebody else about, having learned this craft. Like Tom can write for strings, he can write for horns, he's got an incredible voice leading, all the pro stuff. He's as good as anybody. Right. But then you laugh about like the guy that wrote for Neil Diamond, ba 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 on the trumpets. It's like on the trombones rather. That's going to last forever. Right. And everybody remembers that. Tom Scott, who can write anything, what is he known for? Ba 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 da ba da 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 on peg. It's like this. It's almost like a ditty. But on the other hand, that's part of the heart of arranging is to come up with that iconic, perfect thing that's going to last forever. George Martin. Can you think anybody more important than that? No. And so it's kind of like the great arrangers, and Quincy's a perfect example of that. They can do all the fancy stuff, all the orchestrating, the voice leading, the writing for any style, any band, but then come up with that little hook.
That's right. Yeah.
That little hook.
And it's brilliant. You think about Mozart, he was the most popular composer of his day because he wrote little ditties all over the place. Everybody was writing these serious, epic, concertos, and he was writing a lot of just funky little stuff,
Yeah, but it was brilliant. It was perfect.
Magic flute.
Yeah.
You go, geez, that's awesome.
That's a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's just good stuff. But anyway, I diverse. We were talking about you splitting your time between California and New York, and how you're like me. When I start driving up the hill to Idyllwild, if I've been in LA for 3 weeks, it just so much lifted off my shoulder, But you also spend a lot of time in New York, which is kind of a hectic place. And what do you think inspires you? Are you inspired by the calm tranquility of Idyllwild, or does a city life kind of bump you into your own when you're composing or just thinking about different parts?
I think for what we love about New York, I've never tried to be like a resident in the sense of trying to get involved in the local music scene. I don't do that at all. My wife and I go. We are tourists. We have an apartment, but we're very busy because we're foodies, so we go to restaurants. We go every night to hear jazz. We just heard like a whole bunch of shows just a couple of weeks ago at a wonderful club called Smoke, which is just walking distance from our apartment. It's up at 106 and Broadway. And we go, Village Vanguard, Birdland a lot, but we also go to Metropolitan. We're members of, Metropolitan. We love art, visual arts. My wife's really gotten to be a good painter, and so we go to MoMA all the time and that kind of stuff. And
that's cool.
And we have a few friends there. That's fun, and so we really enjoy the cultural life. And I think that, I'm now at the age where the works of man matter to me more than ever. Where if there's an author I like, there's a place where at some point they'll be doing a book tour. New York will be on the list. Right. If there's an artist you like, at some point, if you're like, look down their list. They got 60 dates in the U.S. New York will be on that list, so I can go hear it. And so that's a big deal. But Idyllwild is a whole different world, and it's not just because it's calm and peaceful. I would say for me, what's important is this sense of community, the fresh air, the beauty of it. People I've known for years and years. I mean, again, I mentioned Julie Lively's memorial, but we've been participants in a bunch of fundraisers over the years for people who've been injured, and people that we barely even knew. And yet all these people turn out, and people throw into the pot, and the GoFundMe works, and we've raised money for people that, I remember there was a gal that used to work at the gastronomy, Anna Sines. She was really sweet. I didn't know her that well. And she had a car accident on the way up from the desert, and couldn't walk anymore. And we threw it together. It wasn't just us. We didn't put it together, but there was, hundreds of people came, and it was at, I think it was at the Creek House or something. We raised $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in this little town. And it's because everybody pitches in. Everybody feels like we're a family. That I've noticed where I've pitched in for people that I barely know. I mean, there's a wonderful gal that works at the Kettle named Cammie who just had a horrible car accident, hit by a drunk driver going 100 miles an hour. And she's lucky she lived. And we just had a fundraiser for her. And a whole bunch of people showed up at Middle Ridge. I was out of town, but Sin Grady had a lot to putting that together, and they raised a ton of money. They raised a ton of money for Miles and Julie, and they had huge amount of medical debt. Kind of a crime that our country, that we can't provide that for. But I mean, and I don't know if everybody showed up there were dear friends of those guys, but they're Idyllwilders. I really do feel like a family up here that I've never had anywhere else, and I don't think I'd ever have anywhere else, and I don't have in New York.
I've always thought of it as I feel responsible for each and every person living here, even the ones I don't know. I don't know everybody in town, and it's gotten a lot less. I used to know, I thought I knew everybody in town, and now I go to the post office or I go to a restaurant, I see more people that I've never seen before. Oh, I've lived here for 10 years. But back in the 90s, everybody knew everybody, and it was But there's still that sense of community. We feel a responsibility because people have decided and chosen to make this their home. Right. We're responsible for them, and they're responsible for us, and we're not going to let anyone in our town. We see one shop that the shop owner moves the business out, and we see an empty shop for more than a week, and we freak out. That should not be. Who's going in there?
Well, we have to remember also that COVID changed things a lot.
Sure,
It raised the prices a lot. A lot of people didn't pay in, and I would like to welcome all of them. I'm really glad they're here and celebrating this town. Another thing that happens too is the demographics. It's like in my mind I'm still 30, but I'm 70, and so it's kind of like a lot of these people that I knew are getting older. Some moved away. Some have had to leave for health issues, like there wasn't enough oxygen up here, and those kind of things happen. And so, it's just a natural thing in life where young people are going to come, and I think they're going to provide vibrancy. There's new restaurants opening up. There's some things that are kind of exciting. So I'm looking positively to it. I'd like to meet some of these young people, but you know how age groups tend to stick together.
Right, yeah.
So all the people at these fundraisers we're talking about tend to be like over 50.
Right, yeah.
And so that's fine. But,
well, everybody grows up, the town grows up, and eventually it'll shift again. You'll get more young people coming up. I have to give a shout out to a friend of mine, and well known to people in Idyllwild, is a man named Shane Stewart, who he's kind of a misunderstood guy, because once you get to that level of business person and real estate owner and all this, people start looking at you as some Grinch or something, and nothing could be farther from the truth. The guy's under the radar doing stuff for this town that's amazing, and he's another guy that to me is just he doesn't take businesses off the hill. He keeps everything centrally sort of located. But I think there are a lot of people in this town like that they don't need the pats on the back. They don't need the handshakes. They just, like you said, you just go and go to a fundraiser. It's not like I don't need to put it online. Hey, look at me giving $500 to somebody who's in need. It's just the town is like, I like to look at it as like an Amish community. Somebody needs their barn built. We're going to get together. I think one of the coolest things for me is when everybody got together and built that the kids' playground over by the amphitheater. It's just people donating wood, and I went over and painted for an afternoon. And
I'm glad to give a shout out to Shane, because he's done a lot for the community, and he's an investor, and he's smart at it.
He's a businessman.
Businessman. He's been a good businessman. I'm trying to be a good businessman.
Me too.
A good investor. I mean, he's kind of been an inspiration for me in terms of like, I'd love to get to close to monthly income. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I also want to say that he's instrumental in having David Butterfield be like being up here. And you want to talk about somebody that's helped this community. I mean, how many people would have bought Joanne's restaurant and not monetized it?
And
but he turns it into a park.
Tore it down to make a park.
And he was behind the significant amount of capital investment that went both into the Faro but also the brew pub.
Yes.
And also bought that land that the park is on. And I'm not even beginning to list all the things he's done for this town, and so I mean, this is a guy that could easily have come in and said, I'm going to monetize everything I do, and that's not his motivation. I mean, I think he's been great, and his wife Lois, and I just think, we're actually really lucky to have those guys up here.
Yeah, Ashley and Shane were big supporters of the film festival from day one, and Shane's mom, Christina. But the first year of the film festival, sorry guys, this isn't the Shane show, but I just want people to come up here to know that there are people in this town who really care about the town, from lower level people who are not as economically vibrant as other people, but Shane, I came to Shane after my film a film of mine was in Sundance, and I said, man, they're making a lot of money at Park City. We should have a film festival here. He gave me the theater for a week. He didn't just give me the theater. He paid for the propane to keep it warm. He paid for the lights, the bulb that runs the projector. And he just said, let's see how it goes.
Right. Yeah, he's one of the engines up here. As I mentioned, Idyllwild Arts is one of the engines. And this town would be the same.
Yeah, Idyllwild Arts is definitely an engine, and people don't even realize it. The amount of jobs that Arts Academy provides is phenomenal.
And brings a lot of talent up here, of a wide variety.
Right, yeah. I want to get back to the studio gig thing. You've played on some big songs on some well-reviewed albums, and I was looking at some of the albums you played on there, just like big reviewed stuff, But what are you most proud of? What sticks out in your mind as some of the highlights of your career as far as recordings go?
Woodland Park Manor, one of Idyllwild, California's best-known and beloved lodging destinations, is a rustic treat for the casual overnighter or vacation traveller. With its many unique rooms and cottages and that special hideaway feel, Woodland Park Manor gives new meaning to the word relaxation. Nestled among the tall pines and centuries-old oak trees, the manor says Idyllwild the moment you enter the property. As a sponsor of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema since year one, all festival attendees are treated like family, because that's what you are to the proprietors. Woodland Park Manor, Idyllwild, California. Book your room now and tell them you're coming for the festival. You will love it.
Idyllwild, California is known for its many quaint shops, but none is more quaint or special than Shala Tea Company in downtown Idyllwild. With a wide variety of regional, international, and exotic blends to choose from, Shala is more than just a tea shop. It's an experience for the soul. As an official sponsor of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema, Shala Tea Company offers a discount for all festival badge holders. And what film festival journey would be complete without just the right tea bag in your travel cup? Shala Tea Company, Idyllwild, California. Experience it.
Hello, this is Arn Hancock of Flying Squirrel Entertainment in Idyllwild, California, inviting you to the 3rd annual Idyllwild Blues Festival, July 4th and 5th. At the historic Rustic Theater, featuring a tribute concert to the late, great Ricky Hendrix, Jimmy's cousin, with an all-star lineup of musicians from across the country. For tickets and more info, call 951-659-2747, and we will see you there.
Let us introduce you to Idyllwild's premier boutique inn, Harvey House, an official sponsor of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema, featuring premium amenities and luxurious accommodations amidst the backdrop of the majestic San Jacinto Mountains. Situated on the banks of tranquil Strawberry Creek, Harvey House offers our guests perfectly appointed accommodations in which to relax, unwind, and enjoy yourself in privacy and style. Our professionally designed property lends an atmosphere of comfort and repose unmatched just about anywhere, making your stay most memorable indeed. Harvey House, Idyllwild, California. Find us at harveyhouseid.com.
Well, I mean, it's always nice to be on a big hit.
Yeah.
And you certainly get, you get some skin for that, where just being on that one big Lionel Richie hit, people say, oh, who was the guy that played piano on that? And then that tune also ended up being a movie called Endless Love.
Right.
So I get royalties from that. And I also, because it's over the years, so just that 3-hour session, I probably made more money over the years off of those 3 hours of work. And all I got for the session was just, double scale. So it's that was certainly a lot of fun. And, I certainly was honored to be the musical director and put together a live album I did with Lee Ritenour back in 98. I was happy to come in and just throw some synths on a track that I wasn't supposed to play on because I was producing somebody up in San Francisco, and I ended up on Merlina Shaw and just like sort of listening to the record and figure out the voicings. That was kind of fun to do. And a double CD that we did with Ritenour in 99, I think, called Overtime. I'm on that. And a good DVD I was proud of that we did at Concord Pavilion back in like 84 that had Ernie Watts and Carlos Vega on drums, Jimmy Johnson, that's a Ritenour thing. But I also, if there's a fellow that I bring up to Idyllwild now and then named Dave Blackburn, and his wife Robin Adler's a great singer, and they're big champions of Joni Mitchell music. And so we've done a bunch of records of Joni Mitchell music, and those guys play that music exquisitely, and she sings exquisitely. Dave's a great guitar player. And over the years, he's like one of my favorite engineers, and I don't have to pay LA rates. I can go down. He's got a studio in Fallbrook, and I swear this guy, he sounds as good as anybody in Los Angeles.
Right.
And he's got great ears, and and he really knows what he's doing. So I've done a bunch of projects with him, and we did a project for a friend of mine where we just put up the money, and we're not trying to sell it. It's just a friend of mine, old friend Jeff Bristol, who was in the band when I met my wife 50 years ago.
That's fun.
And he sings in Spanish. We put together a Spanish record, and we hired, guys to do string parts on synthesizers. We had a guy from Vancouver playing flutes and all this stuff. And I'm really proud how that album came out. And so there's some stuff for him I've done, a couple live things that we did, the Joni Mitchell thing where, I really liked how I played on that. And these are not records they're available, but it's not like widely a record. But as far as I'm concerned, they're good examples of my playing. So there's a bunch of stuff that's the smaller time stuff.
Sure.
Because a lot of the studio work I did back then, it was like I wasn't often featured doing solos. Because most of the studio work, the idea was to play a good part, have good time, and be part of the rhythm section. And I'm very proud to have done that well. But it's not like you listen to this record and go, oh, wow, what a great rhythm part. I mean, well, you can say that with, David Foster and Richard T. and Michael Amardian. But I mean, for the most part, I was doing what was called for, and I tried to lock into the groove. But it's not like, oh, yeah, he's just playing the G chord there. Yeah, well, that was what it was called for, So it's kind of interesting the same way that you can look back on your life and maybe some of you have films you've done, some of them had better success commercially.
Sure.
And there might be one that nobody ever saw that you go, wow, that really worked out how I wanted. And I really love the cinematography.
I do have one of those.
Yeah. See, we all do. So that's actually a joy.
Yeah.
It's actually a joy to sort of go, well, let me play something I thought was good, and so, and because there's a whole bunch of studio stuff that I'll never be able to find where it is because it was, like I said, the B dates. There was a studio called Fidelity back in the days, and I did hundreds of sessions at this place called Fidelity, and it was mostly for, single scale or chump change or cash. There was a guy named Mad Anthony that came into the Flying Jib, that band with Dave Boroff, and he looked like a strange guy, but one guy in the band said, his music's kind of cool. It's kind of Steely Dan-esque. And he got all these musicians to come play on his demos for free. And I learned a lot by doing that. And, I remember one night where we show up and this is like 2 a.m. Nobody's there except Vinny. And so Vinny just started cutting tracks by himself. Like literally, that's how good he is. He could just, hear a demo and play a drum track that we later are going to add stuff to that's going to be perfect. And so I learned so much getting to play on that because I get to say, well, let me try an organ part. Let me try a clavinet part. And, oh, that sucked. Let me do that over, And so I had all sorts of like free studio time and I wasn't getting paid. So all the more they'd go, okay, we'll just do what you want and, and take your time and learn about it, And so, and I've got some of those stuff on cassette. That's all I have now of that stuff. And some of it's really cool. And some of it's kind of lame.
You know what I like about this whole interview, Barnaby, is just that the you still have the passion and you still have like a childlike love of just getting out and playing. And that really comes through.
Oh, I do.
You were talking about being 70. And I go, this guy's like a 16-year-old musician just getting his feet wet.
Well, the learning thing is the big deal. But I just yesterday I wrote out a song by this Norwegian funk pop guy named Ole Barud. Who I'll ever play it with, I have no idea. But just to sit at the piano and play, oh, that's cool chords, and I like the groove on it, and I have to. This summer encampment thing I do, there's some good musicians there, and the one guy who's one of the top studio guitar players in the world, who I'm not in the world of getting to play with this guy in general in studios. I've never worked with him in the studio, but he's on thousands of records, named Dean Parks. And a lesson I've learned from him watching him is, he walks into a camp and there's camps there and everybody's playing music and he doesn't everybody in the camp, all of a sudden they're playing good, and they're listening, and they're using as much space as they can, or playing as tasty as they can, and he could be walking in thinking, if you guys did this all day, you'd be better musicians. But I swear to God, this doesn't cross his mind. I know exactly what he thinks when he walks in. He's just going, what's that guy doing? And what's that guy doing? He's endlessly curious and doesn't waste a nanosecond comparing himself or judging or having his ego wounded or thinking he's better than somebody. And it's like a lesson for all young people in the arts, every young people in film and in dance and in music. Don't waste a second comparing, judging, I'm better, I could be doing that, or this person's horrible, I'm horrible. Don't even waste that. Just go, everybody you're listening to, or every film you watch, there's something you don't know about how to make a film, something you don't know about playing music that you should be curious about. And if all you do is curiosity and learning, you might end up being as good as Dean Parks.
Yeah.
And that to me is a giant lesson I've learned just by watching one of the greatest musicians in the world and how he behaves and how he thinks. And that's, I can't say how important that lesson is for me and for young people, is to just be endlessly curious and just leave the ego at the door, leave the insecurity at the door, because there's people better than you and there's a million of them. There's people worse than you and there's a million of them. Don't waste any time thinking about that.
That's the best way to end this thing right now, Barnaby.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Stephen Savage Show. But before I let you go, Barnaby, tell our listeners how they can find out more about you. Even though we've covered a lot, there's still miles to go. Are you a social media guy, or is there a website where people can get some more info? How do you work that?
I don't have tons of that stuff. Now, I do have, on the Pharaoh site is the stuff we're doing in the summer. I have a website for the Jazzgrass Band called jazzgrassmusic.com.
Okay.
And that's got the dates we're doing, which includes the Pharaoh dates. We're playing at Rancho Mirage Library, I think September 30th, Encinitas Library in San Diego on December 6th. And so I think there's a bio on there somewhere that I have. So, but I don't have like a BarnabyFinch.com. I think I have the webpage somewhere. I've never done much with it,
Yeah.
And so that's the best way to do it. But I have an email address. Somebody wants to write me. I have an email address. It's kind of a public address, and it's Bernie, like Bernie, BERNIE _12345 at Yahoo. So you're welcome to give that out and email that, because I've got a more private one that I don't give out all the time.
Right,
but let me know about music you got going on that you think's great that I should hear. Let me know if you want to come play at some of our stuff, and I'd love to hear young people, love to hear music. I'm learning so much from the young people these days. They're incredible things I've learned about rhythm in 20 years from these young drummers that didn't play like anybody that I grew up with. So thank you so much for having me, Steve.
Yeah, it's awesome, brother. I've enjoyed this so much that we're going to get together again and
Please.
more often so we can just talk film and music.
Love to do that.
And there you have it. So for all of our regular listeners who keep our numbers way up on all platforms, and the new listeners as well who keep finding us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audible, Amazon Music, and on, wherever you're downloading or streaming from at the moment. Thank you for your interest in the show, and don't forget the special 2-day event honoring the great Marshall Hawkins, July 13th and 14th at Pharaoh Restaurant in Idyllwild, California. And you can find more info about that at pharaohrestaurant.com. That's FERRO, pharaohrestaurant.com. So for my executive producer, Steve Tuma, engineer Maurice Sudo, who puts all this together at the end, and the entire Radio Free Idyllwild team, as well as for Barnaby Finch and myself, thanks for listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Barnaby.
Thanks, Steve.
Looking for great Mexican cuisine in Idyllwild, California? Look no further than La Casita, Idyllwild's #1 spot for authentic Mexican fare, serving up both traditional and north-of-the-border specialties. La Casita is also famous for its great beer and wine selection, and the best margaritas to be found anywhere. La Casita, an official sponsor of the Idyllwild International Film Festival, and simply the best Mexican food around.
Born out of creativity and desire, the Peak Restaurant and Bar at Tahquitz Pines is a must-see experience for anyone visiting the beautiful alpine village of Idyllwild, California. Featuring a mix of local and international cuisine, the Peak Restaurant and Bar is the centerpiece of the Tahquitz Resort. Set amid gorgeous mountain surroundings and miles of hiking trails, the Peak is unlike any other eatery around. And as an official sponsor of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema, the Peak is home of the event's famous Filmmakers Village every year. The Peak Restaurant at Tahquitz Pines Retreat. Come dine with us.
For over 70 years, the historic Rustic Theater and Entertainment Center in Idyllwild, California, has been the home for movies and live events for all of the communities that encompass the San Jacinto mountain range. And as the forever home of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema, the Rustic has played host to some of the greatest indie films from around the world, as well as blockbuster first-run movies and music and comedy events. And the Idyllwild Festival has been proud to call the Rustic its home base since 2010. So, whether you're in Idyllwild for the film festival, hiking or rock climbing, or just exploring the beautiful mountain village of Idyllwild, California, make sure to add the Rustic Theater to your list of must-visit spots. For a beer or fine wine at the Rustic Tavern, a tasty meal from the snack bar, or just a great movie date or family night out, the Rustic Theater and Entertainment Center is the right choice in Idyllwild. Pop in and say hello.
No small mountain village would be complete without its favorite local breakfast spot, and the Red Kettle restaurant in Idyllwild, California is just that place. As Idyllwild's premier downtown breakfast and lunch restaurant, the Red Kettle is exactly what you'd expect. Great food, friendly service, and quaint small-town charm, the Red Kettle is the heart of Idyllwild's village life. And as an official sponsor of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema, all festival badge wearers are treated to a 10% discount on every order. The Red Kettle restaurant, Idyllwild, California. Home-style cooking all year round.
It's cool, it's hip, and it's where Idyllwild goes for burgers, fries, sub sandwiches, ice cream, and more. Atomic Cow, downtown Idyllwild, California. Official sponsor of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema. Fast, fierce, and filmmaker friendly. Be there or be square. Atomic Cow.
Going for a hike and just want the best beef or vegan jerky on the planet before you hit the trail? Then Coyote Red's Idyllwild, California is where your search comes to an end. We offer a variety of premier natural foods, including our world-famous House of Jerky brand, barbecue sauces, hot sauces, treats, sweets, and so much more. An official sponsor of the Idyllwild International Festival of Cinema, we are located right downtown at the Fort, directly across from Idyllwild Park. Coyote Red's is where your search for the best beef or vegan jerky on the planet comes to an end.
Thank you for listening to Radio Free Idyllwild, the official music and podcast station for Idyllwild, California, the San Jacinto Mountains, and beyond.